Welcome to the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. I'm your host, Molly Watts. If you want to change your drinking habits and create a peaceful relationship with alcohol, you're in the right place. This podcast explores the strategies I use to overcome a lifetime of family alcohol abuse, more than 30 years of anxiety and worry about my own drinking, and what felt like an unbreakable daily drinking habit. Becoming an alcohol minimalist means removing excess alcohol from your life so it doesn't remove you from life. It means being able to take alcohol or leave it without feeling deprived. It means to live peacefully, being able to enjoy a glass of wine without feeling guilty and without needing to finish the bottle. With science on our side, we'll shatter your past patterns and eliminate your excuses. Changing your relationship with alcohol is possible. I'm here to help you do it. Let's start now. Well, hello and welcome back to the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. With me, your host, Molly Watts, coming to you from, well, it's a little bit gray and cloudy here in Oregon this morning, but I found some sunshine as promised. I was in Hawaii. It was magnificent. And then when I came back home, it was sunny here too. Now, again, we've got a little bit of rain on the horizon. Not going to lie, I'm a little bit disappointed about that because I kind of thought maybe I turned the corner. I went to Hawaii, brought the sunshine, and thought it was going to stick around. But regardless, it was a fantastic break, and I am super excited to be back. I am excited to share with you this podcast interview I did with Dr. Jade Wu. Jade is a board-certified sleep psychologist, researcher, and speaker, and she works at the Duke University School of Medicine. She has recently written a new book called Hello Sleep, which we talk about at length. And what I love about Dr. Jade Wu's work is that she focuses on behavioral changes for treating insomnia. So non-medication treatments to help people improve their sleep and their waking life as well. Really excited because May, if you did not know, is Better Sleep Month. So what better way to kick off a month that is focused on sleep than to talk with a sleep specialist? And for many of the people that listen to this podcast, they are turning to using alcohol as a sleep tool. And we've talked about it many times that it's really not helping you get better sleep. But what I love about this conversation with Jade is that you'll hear some really fantastic tips and some myth busting regarding your sleep habits. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Dr. Jade Wu. Good morning, Jade. Thank you so much for being here on the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. I, for one, am super excited to talk to you about all things sleep.
Thanks so much for having me, Molly.
Yeah, sleep. So May is actually Better Sleep Month. So this is a perfect time to have this podcast recording and jump into this conversation. And I'm really excited to share your new work and your book with my audience. So before we get into the rest of the podcast, tell me a little bit more about your project and about writing the book in the first place.
Sure, thank you. So I am a behavioral sleep medicine specialist, which means that I help people improve their sleep without medications.
Yeah, love it.
Thank you. Yeah, and so my whole mission is to basically spread the good word of sleep. And I really wanted to write this book because the patients that I work with all struggle with insomnia and other types of sleep problems. And one really common thing is that people feel really lonely in their experience of insomnia. It's, like we may know that a lot of people have insomnia. In fact, something like 25 million, 30 million American adults do, but it still feels like a very lonely, isolating experience at night when you're just like so frustrated and just trying to get to sleep. So I wanted to write this book that's very compassionate, that's very like, I understand your experience, and here are some things we can actually do to reset our relationship with sleep. So that's
I love
why
the
I wrote
title. And I love the title, Hello Sleep. I mean, it just, for a long time, I used to have some pretty significant sleep struggles, but now I'm in a really good sleep pattern and I'm really, really appreciative of it. But
Awesome.
That feeling of hello, it's just when you really are struggling and all you want to do is sleep,
Mhm.
Having a compassionate, caring voice in your ear, or, as you're reading, just really, I can imagine, is very helpful for people.
I hope so.
Yeah, I know so. I know so. So the reason that I really wanted to have a conversation with you, and we talked about it briefly in our conversations, is I have so many people that listen to this podcast who are working on their relationship with alcohol. And one of the key beliefs that many of them have is that alcohol is helping them sleep better, which I know and I've shared before and I've shared many times on the podcast. It's simply not true. But one of the things that it does help people do is get to sleep quicker. So it can help you get to sleep, but it then disrupts sleep. So tell me a
Mhm.
little bit about your take on alcohol.
Yeah, this is such a tricky one. And I certainly have worked with many people who have this kind of catch-22 relationship with sleep and alcohol, where they really don't want to have to drink to go to sleep, but then it feels like that's the only way. And then when they've tried not drinking, and then going to sleep, it just seems to really not work. And then so they feel really stuck. And I can very much sympathize with that because, sleep is something that hopefully happens every night, so
Right.
you can kind of feel like you're on the hook for it every night, and you can start to dread the battle with insomnia as you're approaching bedtime. And if you have this thing that takes the edge off, that feels like it's a pretty sure go-to that you can always rely on to at least, ease you into sleep, then of course that's extremely tempting. And I can very much understand why people would
Yeah.
feel stuck in this pattern.
Yeah.
And you're right, alcohol can kind of tamp down on the busy brain, or just the hyper arousal, which just means too much brain or body feeling revved up. So alcohol can sort of take the edge off. But once you actually do fall asleep, alcohol can keep your body temperature higher. It can keep you getting into deep sleep, and it really can disrupt the quality of your sleep and
Mm-hmm.
end up making you sleeping shorter. And also, over time, if this becomes truly a thing that you feel like you rely on to sleep, then even just on a psychological level, it is harder to sleep on your own. So then you really kind of get stuck in this pattern.
It's really interesting. I'm so glad that you mentioned psychological, because that's one of the things that's really fascinated me about your work specifically, because I think so many people think that sleep is just a biological function that we cannot, that we don't have any input into with our brains. And I believe you would say that's not true.
Yeah, so much of sleep is psychological. And after all, sleep mostly happens in the brain. The brain is the
Yes.
thing that, makes us sleep, makes us wake, and tries to find the balance between the two things. The master clock for our circadian rhythms lives in the brain, and that kind of runs a show for when we should feel sleepy versus awake. So, sleep is a brain activity, and it's a psychological activity too, because sleep, here's how I think about sleep. It's like a friend, a
Mm.
very loyal old friend that has, been with you all of these years, but she's also a shy friend. So if you really try to chase her down really hard, and you're really overbearing, and you're like, my way or the highway, you have to show up at this time in this specific way or else, and you blame all your problems on your friend's sleep, if you don't get enough sleep,
Right.
then that's putting a lot of stress and pressure on the relationship. So then sleep runs away from you. So there's a lot of soft, pieces to the relationship with sleep, that you're right. It's not just a biological on or off switch.
That I love that metaphor of it being a friend, a shy friend. So, one of these myths that people carry around in their brains about sleep that I know you've talked about is the fact that they need to sleep through the night. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons people get stuck in this cycle of wanting to get to sleep, is because they feel like they should be sleeping, you know, through the night.
Yeah.
Is it
And
true?
no, nobody sleeps straight through the night. And if you do, then you're in a coma, or I
Oh.
mean, that's not even sleep, So it's very normal and healthy for us to wake up a number of times during the night. In fact, for adults, the average number is something in the 10 to 16 times range. Now,
Wow.
most of those times you don't know or you don't remember. But it's also okay to remember a small handful of those times. That's very normal. And even to have one awakening that's a little bit longer, that's not abnormal either. You know, before our industrialized world, like in pre-industrial Europe, for example, we knew that people just as a matter of routine got up during the night for like an hour or two to, you know, rise bread or visit neighbors or sing songs and whatnot, and then go back for their second sleep. So
Oh, wow.
biologically, our sleep is actually built to be kind of two halves that are kind of qualitatively different in terms of what stage of sleep we're in, you know, what our bodies are going through. And it's okay to have a gap in between those two halves.
That I love as well, because I think that I know for me, when I was struggling with, like I said, I wasn't struggling necessarily to get to sleep, but I had a bad situation, continual wake up in the middle of the night. And it wasn't just, turnover, go back to sleep, even a half. It was
Hmm.
like persisting for 2.5, 3 hours. And that
Oof,
that was,
yeah.
yeah, not good. Right. But
Hmm.
I think that the idea that I think getting over that, definitely there was a cognitive part of that where I would just get fearful and stressed out and like, oh God, it's going to happen again. So the idea that you don't have to sleep through the night, that you can have two balance or two different pieces of that. I love that idea as well. And this idea too about the different levels of sleep, deep sleep versus light sleep. I think we're lulled into thinking that we want to get deep sleep. It sounds really good, like deep sleep, like that's what we
Hmm.
really need and want. But is it true, or is light sleep just as important?
That's a great question. It's funny, when I ask people, so people often come to me and say, "Oh, my sleep tracker told me that I am
Uh-huh.
getting such little deep sleep. I don't even know how I'm alive right now." I'm like, "Oh, geez, how little is your, you know, deep sleep?" And they say, "Oh, you know, like 20%." I'm like, 20% is pretty good.
uh,
So actually, deep sleep is supposed to take up about 15-ish, 20-ish% of the
okay.
night. And light sleep about 45 to 55%. So about half of the night should be light sleep. And then REM sleep should be about 25% of the night. And then about 5-ish% of the night, maybe 10% should be awake.
Okay.
So, you know, it's the way I think about it, it's almost like nutrition. It's not like as much protein as possible. Like 100% protein is, you know, of your diet is
Right.
the best, right? Like we need to balance our different types of nutrition. You need protein and you need other types. And I, you know, I don't, I'm not a nutritionist, so I don't want to go too deep into that and say something wrong. But
You
basically,
get
we
the
know
idea. Yeah,
yeah, a
right.
balanced diet is good, just like a balanced diet of different types of sleep is good. Deep sleep is very important. Obviously, it, you know, clears out toxins in your brain, it heals your body, it boosts your immune system, it, you know, you release growth hormones during it. That's all very important. But during light sleep, we are also consolidating our memories and what we learned during the day. We are resting our bodies. You know, we're giving our bodies our bodies and our brains a break from doing the work of deep sleep, because deep sleep is not just like you turn all the way off. It's actually a very active brain state. So your brain needs a break from that too. And then REM sleep is also important. That's where we do a lot of emotion regulation, memory consolidation. If we dream, it's usually during REM. Our muscles are also getting a break during that time because most of our muscles are kind of turned off during REM, so we don't act out our dreams. So, you know, all the different types of sleep are fascinating and
Hmm.
important.
Oh, I love that. And I love that the fact that you gave all those percentages, folks. Just dial into that. Go back. That was worth the listen right there. You all know I'm a science girl, and that is why I am so proud of my partnership with Sunnyside. Sunnyside has great data based on their user experience, and they also have great science techniques behind what drives the program in the first place. Users of Sunnyside in their first 30 days experience, on average, a 29% reduction in drinks. They avoid 1,500 calories, and they've saved over $50 each month. This is because there is science behind the program. Sunnyside helps you reach your goals and stick with them long term by focusing on three scientifically proven superpowers. One is pre commitment. You intentionally make a plan ahead of time, and we talk about making a plan all the time here on the podcast. Number two is conscious interference. And you'll learn that the habit of tracking each drink helps you decide about it. Number 3 is positivity. We know this is not easy sometimes, right? And we all need a little boost. I try to be a boost, and Sunnyside is a great boost via text message or email to keep you motivated. So if you haven't already checked it out, I invite you www.sunnyside.co/Molly to get started on a free 15-day trial today. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the other things besides alcohol that people use to try to help them sleep. Melatonin being one that many of us hear about. And I know what I appreciate so much about your work is the focus on behavioral change, not on medicines and taking prescriptions to try to break the insomnia pattern. But what's your take on melatonin? Is it really as harmless as people think?
So believe it or not, melatonin is not an insomnia drug. It is not meant to help people sleep better.
Wow.
It is a time shifting drug. So melatonin is a natural hormone that we already produce to keep track of time in our bodies. So it's supposed to ramp up at night and subside during the day. So for people who are, for example, night owls who need to live as a morning person, people whose circadian rhythms, body clocks are just shifted too late, we can use melatonin like many hours before bedtime to try to pull their melatonin curve earlier so they can feel sleepy earlier. But then they'll also wake up earlier too. So melatonin is not a drug to just make you sleep more or sleep better. It's simply there for shifting time. So most people who are taking melatonin, first of all, don't need it. And if they are taking it for insomnia, they're taking it at the wrong times and at the wrong dose. And melatonin may be not harmless because it's not a prescription medication, it's over the counter, right, which means that it's not as closely FDA regulated.
Right.
And so a big study has found, and actually a second study that just recently came out, found that the amount of melatonin that's in the gummy or the pill or the whatever can be so much more than what's advertised on the label. So if it says 1 milligram, it can be up to 3 or 5 times as high as that. Could be 5 milligrams in the pill. So if you're taking that big of a dose of melatonin, it can stay in your system too long. And that can actually backfire, make you groggy during the day or shift your circadian curve in the wrong direction. So melatonin is not just a harmless, why not try it, like chamomile tea kind of thing.
Right.
It actually can backfire.
Right. Which I can vouch for because, of course, back in those days when I was struggling with my sleep, it's Dr. Google, right? We look up things and melatonin is something that everybody thinks, oh, I should take that to help me get to sleep better. And I obviously wasn't using it the right way because I did feel groggy all the time. Which could have also been because I was, it didn't really help me. What's funny is that it didn't really help me with my middle of the night insomnia either.
Oh, yeah.
It was I would wake up still. So anyway,
Yeah.
one of those other things that we hear about, or we hear from, I don't know, celebrities and gurus, they seem to be able to sleep less. Like they're able to manufacture or force themselves to operate better at lower hours of sleep per day, somehow miraculously, and they've managed to do this, and they're successful and productive. So we think that maybe you can actually get away with only sleeping 4, 5, 6 hours a night. Is that true?
So it's probably not true. So most of the time
I was kind of hopeful.
Most of the time I hear about this, I just kind of roll my eyes because I don't know if it's part of their personal branding or just bragging rights or whatever it may be. But the vast majority of people cannot function well or be healthy on so little sleep. I mean, there are people, and they're extremely rare, who need very little sleep, like 4 or 5 hours a night. And they do exist. I've met them, but most people listening to this podcast just assume that that's not you until proven otherwise. And sometimes we can feel like we're functioning fine on very little sleep. but we might actually be sort of kidding ourselves. We might feel almost a little hypomanic, like really like jazzed up, like, oh, I only got 4 hours of sleep last night. I feel great. I feel on top of the world. Like I'm quick. I'm on my feet, but that's actually just you being a little hypomanic. That's your brain
Right.
compensating
Right.
for not enough sleep by like hyping you up. But that doesn't mean you're actually making good decisions or, reacting quickly to what you need to, or, emotion regulating well, or doing any of the things that we need to do to actually be a happy, functioning human
Mhm.
being.
Yeah. I, for one, I've really become very, I don't know, sleep aware, sleep sensitive. I really notice in myself
Mhm.
when I don't get that, when I don't get my full normal seven, I aim for 7.5 hours every night. And when I don't get that, I can
Mhm.
definitely feel it in my body. I can feel it in my brain. And I'm eager to get caught up, which I think I would love to ask you that. I know it's not a myth that maybe you and I talked about it beforehand, but is it possible to catch up on your sleep?
That's a great question. In the short term, yes, not in the long term. So
Okay.
it's not like if you sleep an hour less than you need to per day for a very busy year, and then at the end of that year, you can sleep 365 hours straight to catch up. Like
Right.
that's not possible, right? Like at some point, the ship has sailed, and the
You're perpetually
whatever.
sleep deprived at a
Right,
certain point.
exactly. Yeah, like at some point the damage has already been done and you can't reverse, that damage. But I wouldn't sweat it if it's like I had a long weekend partying with friends who are visiting from out of town, and we just kind of like threw sleep to the wayside. That's fine. We're all allowed to have fun, and we are allowed to have some resiliency and adaptability in our sleep. That's fine. Sleep will take care of you. You'll probably crash and sleep a lot more than usual the next day, and that's okay. We're allowed to kind of go with the flow a little bit.
And this is again some of the stuff I really love about your work, and just this idea that sleep is a relationship that a relationship we want to foster and not just chase. But some of us feel very frustrated by what we call, and I know what you call as well, our busy brains, the brain that just does not seem to want to turn off at night. And so let's talk a little bit about that and some of the strategies that you employ with because again, what I love about your work is the focus on basically cognitive behavioral therapy, changing some of
Hmm.
the stories that you have and the thoughts that you have, because that's really
Hmm.
aligns with the work that I do as well.
Right.
But when it comes to turning that busy brain off at night, that's
Mhm.
why I think people want to change. That's why the alcohol sounds so good, because they
Yes.
know that it helps turn the brain off. So
Hmm.
let's talk about some tips that we can share with folks to help them de-busy the brain at nighttime.
I like that. Busy the brain. Yes. So I think the first story that we want to take another look at is this idea that, oh, my brain is busy and that's keeping me up.
Okay.
So a lot of the time, it's actually that you're up and therefore there's space for your brain to be busy.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so our brains are just designed to be working at all times. Like we as linguistic creatures, we're just not good at not talking to ourselves about something,
Right.
right? So if you're awake, you're going to be thinking, but it's not necessarily the fact that you're thinking that's
That's
keeping
keeping
you
you
awake.
awake.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. You're
So
blowing my
that
brain. You're blowing my mind right there, Jade. I thought it was.
so I love to start with that because I think that takes a little pressure off.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes we're trying so hard to turn the brain off and there just is not an off switch. So if we're just trying desperately to say like, just shut up, brain, just turn off. Like if I say to you, do not, on the threat of death, think about a pink elephant.
Right.
Like that's the first thing you're going to think about. Now you're going to be thinking about that pink elephant for the rest of the day. So if we push against our thoughts, they're going to push back harder. So instead of doing that, let's do get out of our head and into our body.
Okay.
So first of all, recognize that if you're not sleepy enough, if you're going to bed too early, or if you took a big nap earlier today, or if you fell asleep on the couch watching TV after dinner, then you may just not be sleepy right now at regular bedtime. So you may just have to stay awake a little bit longer. And if you really listen to your body will tell you, because there's a difference between being tired and being sleepy. If you're sleepy, your eyes will be droopy. You're going to be like yawning a lot and you're going to be falling asleep. That's sleepy. But if you're just tired, like, oh, I had a long day. I'm so done with it. My body is tired. That's great. You need to rest, but you may not need to sleep. So get out of your
Okay.
head, into your body, listen to what your body is really telling you in terms of what you need in this moment, whether it's sleep or rest or something else. Another way to get out of your head and into your body is to just really pay attention non-judgmentally to what your body is doing and what it's feeling. And that way we can help to slow down the mind, not to shut it off, because that's impossible, but we can slow it down a little bit. Because when you're in your body can really only be in one place and one time at a time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas your brain can go to 1,000 different places and times and hypothetical futures, and there's infinite circles you can run in your brain. But in your body, there's just the one thing. So if you pay attention to your breath, for example, and just notice the sensations of the breath, of the air coming in, of the air leaving, of how your body is moving, not trying to change any of it, but just to notice. If you just notice your breath for 2 minutes, I promise you, your brain will slow down a little
Yeah.
bit, will calm down the body and brain a little bit, and allow sleep to come to you more easily if sleep is ready to come to you.
Oh, that is gold. I love it. You talk too about this transition, and it's kind of, I think, aligned with what you're talking about with the body, but from doing to being, from doing the
Mm-hmm.
transition, because we're so goal oriented during the day. We're crossing off the to-do list. We're just constantly getting things done. And
Mm-hmm.
so talk to me about that, about basically moving our brains, right? From doing to being.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one. Thank you for bringing that up. It's, you know, our day-to-day modern lives are just so goal-oriented and so busy. We are very productivity oriented, I think.
For sure.
Often I'm talking to my patients and they're just saying like, I don't like to sit still because I want to get stuff done. And I can relate to that, as a type A person, I feel that all the time
Yeah.
too. But then what happens when we're constantly on the go and getting stuff done? I mean, the message we're sending to our bodies is that there must be a saber-tooth tiger behind us chasing
Right.
us, because otherwise, why wouldn't you sit down under the shade of a tree and hang out with your tribe member and, pick fleas out of their hair, or, do something relaxing like that, right? So, these cavemen, cavewomen still live within us. We're still very evolutionarily very old, even though
Mhm.
we're living in this new world. So we need to honor that. We need to show our brains and show our bodies that it actually is safe, by taking breaks during the day. And then at night, your body will say, okay, we've taken breaks during the day. There's no tiger on the horizon. Now it's time to wind down, and we can let down our guard to do that. So switching over to being mode, which is just noticing what's around you and allowing your body to tell you what it needs, rather than being goal oriented and making stuff happen.
I love that. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about your tips too, Jade, is the idea that you can enjoy some extra me time. Don't force it. And what I really appreciated, because I am a person that definitely uh doesn't have like perfect sleep hygiene when it comes to screens, especially. And this was something that I just loved about your what you said, is like sleep hygiene doesn't have to be perfect, and I can actually look at my screens at night and it's not going to just totally disrupt everything that I've ever thought about my sleep.
That's right. That's the good news I come bearing, is you can look at your screens at night. It's okay. I mean, I would try to maybe dim the screens a little bit and
Yep.
maybe not do like extremely stimulating things like playing the most graphic video game or something. Or I don't know, for some people, even that's relaxing. So everyone knows themselves best. Think about the intention of what you're using your screens for. Like, are you using your screens to relax and to connect with friends and to enjoy some storytelling, some content? Great. But if you're doom scrolling, looking for the thing that's going to make you angry, or if you're, distracting away from a really important thought or emotion that you really should be processing on your own, then that may not be as helpful. But just screens themselves are not the devil, especially if you get lots and lots of light during the day. So if you are
Okay.
able to go outside for at least half an hour during the day and get some, even if it's cloudy, it's still a
Yeah.
lot brighter outside than inside. If you get lots of light exposure during the day, then that mitigates the effect of screens at night, because as long as there's a big contrast between day versus night, then your brain will know the difference and it will not mess up your body clock.
Oh, that's really great news, because everybody that listens to this podcast knows I've been on this kick with morning light, because there's a lot of great research for getting morning light right when we first wake up. And I'm finding it really, really helpful for many things, and also obviously for circadian rhythm. So that's fantastic. And it also the screens allows me to listen to audiobooks at night, which is something that I find to be very, very helpful. It's kind of what pushes me over the hump, especially which I don't know. For me, I actually listen to books that I've listened to before when I've been awake, because I don't want to get into a book so much that I want to keep listening and not fall asleep. But when I listen to a book, especially if it's a great audio, or some people tell me, I listen to your podcast, Molly, and it puts me to sleep because I love you listening to your voice. I'm like, perfect, whatever. If it works for you, great.
Yeah.
But I find listening to a certain voice, if it's somebody the narrator that I really appreciate and like, it really does soothe and help me, and gets my brain listening enough where it's turning off the other stuff, and then it just kind of lulls me into sleep, which I guess is just kind of harkens back to when we're young and children, and we've got bedtime stories, right? I mean, listening to voices is something I think many of us can find comfort in, and definitely helps me at least get to sleep.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's a really good point about children being read to at bedtime. And that's one of the universal favorite activities of children, right? They feel loved and safe, and they get to use their imagination a little bit. And a lot of kids talk to themselves after lights out. They just chat with themselves in bed, and that's a self-soothing thing that we naturally do as kids. We probably don't do that much as adults anymore, especially if we have a bed partner who would be really pissed off by that. But listening to a podcast or audiobook, I do that basically every night when I go to bed as well. And it's it's a great redirection for your brain as well, because no matter how engaging a book might be, for example, an audiobook, it's probably not going to be as personally engaging as whatever big worry you have on your mind, So if that worry is not something you're going to be able to solve right now, you might as well defer it till tomorrow and redirect your brain to a nice story that you're listening to.
I love it. Dr. Jade Wu, I could probably talk to you all day about sleep, which would not be very beneficial for you, because I know you've got work to do, and I do as well. But it is great to have you on the show. The book, my friends, is called Hello Sleep, and you can find it anywhere. I will link it in the show notes, of course, and I will link everywhere that you can learn more about Jade's work and some of the podcasts you've done recently. You used to host the Sassy Psychologist on the Quick and Dirty Tips podcast network.
That's right.
So you went back on there and shared some of these tips that we've talked about a little more in depth. So I will share those episodes as well. And just really great to have you here. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Good. I always hope it's fun. And we've also, I think, shared some really great information. So thanks, Jade.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. This podcast is dedicated to helping you change your drinking habits and to create a peaceful relationship with alcohol. Use something you learned in today's episode and apply it to your life this week. Transformation is possible. You have the power to change your relationship with alcohol now. For more information, please visit me at www.mollywatts.com.